Hello and welcome to today's episode of Knobi Cooks. Today I have a special treat for you. Today we are cooking Spätzle with sauce. This traditional dish from southern Germany is simply unparalleled. But now, without further ado, let's go straight to the kitchen. If you enjoy my content, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to my channel. For today's dish, we will need chicken breast, some chanterelles, a bit of water, some champignons, an onion, some flour, a couple of spices, some cream cheese, a large pan with clarified butter, a pot with boiling water, I preheated mine already, and of course, our Spätzle, a special kind of noodles. As always, our first step will be to dice our onion. For this, we halve the onion and then do some lateral cuts across the onion halves. Afterwards, we simply do our horizontal cuts to receive some nice onion dices. For this dish, I would even recommend you to not do very fine dices and do some rather chunky onion dices. They do fit into the sauce quite well. After we have diced our onion, we simply put it into the pan and then turn on the heat. We want to let our onion sizzle until it's glassy. And while I have the time here in the beginning, a small caveat for this dish. Traditionally, you would be more likely to use a lean pork as meat or even veal, but let's call it a modern adaptation when using chicken breast. Also, I highly recommend you to use mushrooms. Here I'm using champignons and chanterelles. You could leave either of those away and you don't have to include both types of mushrooms into your sauce. However, I think both of them are a very nice fit for this sauce. So go and try out yourself what kind of sauce you prefer for this dish. Okay, so next up our champignons. When cooking with mushrooms, it is always important to first check whether there is still some dirt clinging to your mushrooms. I have checked that already, so I can use them for cooking. Afterwards, in the case of champignons, I always remove the bottom tip of the stem. If you ask me, that part is most of the time not looking very tasty, and that's why I remove it. When it comes to cutting champignons, I always do cut them in slices first, and afterwards I dice the champignons. Here I leave it up to you whether you prefer smaller dices or larger dices. I usually prefer smaller dices simply because I like to cook my mushrooms very thoroughly. So we will dice all of our champignons until none of them are left, and afterwards we simply add them all into the pan to our sizzling onions. And another word on the mushrooms: if you're cooking this dish for someone that doesn't like the taste of mushrooms very much, you can also leave them out. However, if you're cooking this dish for someone who simply does not like the texture of mushrooms, I still recommend you to include the mushrooms into the sauce. In the first case, you will miss out some of the grand taste of this dish, but in the second case you can simply do some larger dices. This way you will have the taste of mushrooms in your sauce, and the person that doesn't like the mushrooms can just sort them out. By the way, the second case was me as a child. I myself didn't like the texture of mushrooms for a long time, and it took me quite a while to get used to it. However, I always kind of liked the taste, so that second method was a compromise for my mom when she was cooking this dish. Okay, but enough childhood stories for now. Okay, so now we have all of our champignons in our pan. Now we want to stir them under. And now I will show you a little trick. When the champignons are still raw, they usually soak up much of the fat in your pan. That's why we will add some water first. This way the champignons will soak up the water instead of the fat, which is good because then you don't need to add tons of fat into your pan. And don't worry, they will release the water later on, so you can still fry them properly. Just make sure you're not adding too much water at first. Okay, and since we're in the process of cooking our mushrooms, we will now add the chanterelles into the pan as well. I'm using frozen chanterelles for this dish, though if you can get your hands on fresh ones, that's way better. But here too, make sure you have cleaned your chanterelles before adding them into your pan. Also, I forgot to cut mine, so remember to cut yours into smaller pieces. Which leaves only the last ingredient we need to cut, our chicken breast. These individual fillets are quite thick, that's why I'm halving all of them first. Afterwards, you can cut the individual steaks into strips, and then in the next step simply dice those strips into small meat chunks. And while we dice our meat, our mushrooms will sizzle away and lose lots and lots of water, which is great. Concerning the meat, I chose chicken breast because I think it appeals to the most people. If you are using pork, that adds some different taste to the dish, but is also very tasty. And if you want to cook up something special, I highly recommend you try this dish as a variation with veal. I often use veal for this dish if I cook it for a holiday or if there are some guests coming over. But I leave it up to you. Simply play with the ingredients and choose what you like best. My only recommendation is that you use some kind of meat. Okay, but now let's have a look at our mushrooms. You can see they are swimming in water right now. That's not only the water we added to the pan, but also all of the water which the mushrooms release during the cooking process. Here I recommend you to boil most of it off, because if you drain it away, you will also lose some mushroom flavor. This will take some time, so you will have to show some patience. However, if you ask me, it is well worth the wait, because that mushroom taste is simply incredible. Afterwards, make some space in your pan and add some additional fat, in my case clarified butter, to the pan. And now in that freed up space we can add our chicken breast and start frying it. And as a quick side note, it might be even better to take out the mushrooms and keep them warm and only fry your chicken breast in the pan. This way your chicken breast will cook even faster and brown even more nicely. So I might not be the best example here. Sorry about that. Nevertheless, after we have put our chicken breast into the pan, we can already start seasoning it. For that, simply salt your chicken breast and afterwards add some black pepper to it. Those are basically all of the spices we will need. Though if you like to, you can also add parsley, fresh or dried one, because that also fits very well into this dish. Somehow I didn't have it on my mind for this video, and that's why I forgot to include it into the sauce. If you do it like I did here, keep your chicken breast separate from the mushrooms at first, because on its own it will fry better at first. Only later, when it started browning in some places, you should mix it under the mushrooms and fry them together. With that much mass in your pan, that might also take quite a bit of time. So earlier on I said that Spätzle with sauce is a traditional southern German dish. That's not entirely true. It's a traditional Swabian dish, which happens to lie in southern Germany. So apologies and shoutouts to all my Swabians watching. Another spice you might or might not want to add into the sauce are green pepper kernels. They are usually milder than black pepper. However, they can still be very spicy, so keep that in mind when adding it to the sauce. You can see me adding whole green pepper kernels at this stage, and that is so they get softened up a little bit by all the moisture in the pan. They will act as small surprises when eating your Spätzle with sauce later on. Okay, time for the next step. Now we will add some flour to our mixture. Afterwards, we simply stir it under. The flour will now cling to the other ingredients and will already soak up some of the moisture in our pan. And later on, when we will add the water, it will also soak up much of that water. This way we ensure that our sauce will get extra creamy and extra tasty. It's basically a roux, but with diversions. Speaking of water, we will now add some water into the pan, which we will then too simply stir under. You should now already see and feel a kind of gravy forming as a base for our sauce. But this sauce is not done yet. In the next step we will add our cream cheese to it and stir it under as well. And here I have to add another side note as well. traditionally you would use cream and not cream cheese. Though I really prefer cream cheese instead of cream because it makes the sauce, well, even more creamy. I hope you haven't added too much salt into the sauce in the beginning, because we will now add some vegetable broth to the sauce. Simply stir that broth under and then let your sauce simmer away. At this stage, maybe do a small taste test and add additional seasoning if your sauce needs it. If not, great, because the sauce is then finished. You can now leave it bubbling away at low heat so it does not burn into your pan. Which only leaves us with one final step. We need to cook our Spätzle. I did buy fresh Spätzle in my supermarket. I will simply add them into the boiling water and then cook them for very little time. They do really take very little time. Keep that in mind. You can also buy dried Spätzle and cook with those, though I prefer the fresh ones. Well, and if you cannot get your hands on Spätzle in your supermarket, you can always make them yourself. There are tons of tutorials for making Spätzle on the internet, so simply follow one of those. Though I too plan on doing a Spätzle video in the future, so keep a watch out for that. And my tutorial will of course be better than all the others on the internet. Or if you don't want to make Spätzle yourself and are not able to buy them, you can also substitute your Spätzle with different kind of noodles. The Swabians will be very angry about that, though you can just ignore them. As a replacement, I think fusilli or maybe penne would work fine, though take those you like the most. With that, I have now drained off the water of my Spätzle and we can now start serving the dish. For that, simply put a good portion of Spätzle onto a plate and then add plenty of sauce on top of them. After that, you could garnish your plate with fresh parsley or even dried one. This would make the dish look even more tasty. But now we have once again arrived at the end of an episode. I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope you liked this dish. If you have cooked it yourself, tell me down below in the comments how you liked it. And if you like my content, I would be very happy if you leave me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Spätzle with sauce is just one of the traditional German dishes I have in my recipe book. So watch out for more traditional German cuisine if you like that. I am as always Knobi and I see you in the next episode. Goodbye.